The year is 1933. Adolf Hitler seizes control of Germany. Freedoms vanish under the Nazi regime. Hitler's rise was no accident. He exploited Germany's post-WU1 humiliation. Mein Kampf outlined his twisted ideology. Hitler capitalized on the Great Depression. He dismantled the Weimar Republic. The world watched in alarm. The swastika symbolized Nazi power. Jews faced relentless persecution. Appeasement emboldened Hitler. Nazi propaganda controlled Germany. Hitler Youth indoctrinated children. The world braced for conflict. Nazi rule transformed German culture. Intellectual freedom was extinguished. Art and music were controlled. Hitler prepared for war. He rearmed Germany. The Anschluss emboldened him. Appeasement failed. The Munich Agreement betrayed Czechoslovakia. Hitler's ambitions grew. September 1st, 1939. Germany invaded Poland. World War II began. Blitzkrieg devastated Europe. France fell to Germany. Europe was under Nazi control. Section 3. The Battle of Britain. A nation stands alone. With Europe under Nazi control, Great Britain stood alone. Prime Minister Winston Churchill rallied the British people. "We shall fight on the beaches," he declared. "We shall never surrender." In the summer of 1940, the Battle of Britain began. The Luftwaffe launched relentless air assaults. Their goal was to cripple the RAF for a German invasion. The RAF, though outnumbered, fought back fiercely. The skies over England roared with battle. The Blitz gave the RAF time to recover. By October, the Luftwaffe had suffered heavy losses. Hitler postponed the invasion indefinitely. The Battle of Britain marked a turning point. It was Hitler's first major defeat. Section 4. The Eastern Front. A colossal clash of ideologies. While the Battle of Britain raged, Hitler planned his next conquest, the Soviet Union. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began. Over 3 million German troops stormed across the Soviet border. The invasion was driven by ideology and ambition. Hitler sought Lebensraum, or living space, in the Soviet Union. He viewed the Soviet Union as an ideological enemy. The initial German advance was swift and brutal. Soviet forces were caught off guard and ill-prepared. The Red Army was poorly equipped and hampered by Stalin's purges. German forces, led by skilled generals, sliced through Soviet defenses. By autumn 1941, German troops had advanced deep into Soviet territory. The invasion unleashed unimaginable brutality. Both sides fought with desperation and ideological hatred. For the Germans, it was a war of extermination. The Eastern Front was a theater of war unlike any other, a brutal struggle between two totalitarian regimes, a war that claimed millions of lives and scarred Eastern Europe. Section 5. The tide turns, from North Africa to Italy. The tide of war began to turn against the Axis powers. In North Africa, British forces under General Montgomery fought against Rommel's Afrika Korps. The campaign saw significant victories on both sides. The decisive Allied victory came at El Alamein in November 1942. Allied forces landed in Sicily in July 1943, beginning Italy's liberation. The Italian campaign was long and arduous. The fall of Sicily led to Mussolini's regime collapse. The Italian king dismissed Mussolini and signed an armistice. Germany occupied Italy, installing Mussolini as puppet leader. Allied forces captured Rome in June 1944. These victories were significant turning points in the war. They demonstrated the growing strength of the Allies. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. The path to victory was now within sight. As the war raged on, a horror of unimaginable proportions was unfolding in the shadows. Hitler's hatred of the Jews, a cornerstone of his twisted ideology, had metastasized into a systematic campaign of extermination, the Holocaust, a genocide that would claim the lives of 6 million Jews and millions of others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. The Holocaust was the culmination of centuries of anti-Semitism in Europe, fueled by Nazi propaganda that demonized Jews as a parasitic race responsible for Germany's ills. With chilling efficiency, the Nazi regime established a network of concentration camps and extermination camps across occupied Europe. Jews, rounded up from their homes and deported to these camps, were subjected to unimaginable horrors. Stripped of their possessions, their dignity, and their humanity, they were forced into slave labor, starved, tortured, and murdered in gas chambers. The names of these camps, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, became synonymous with unimaginable cruelty and barbarity. The Holocaust was a crime against humanity of unparalleled scale and depravity. It was a testament to the depths of human cruelty and the dangers of unchecked hatred and intolerance. The world would forever be haunted by the memory of the Holocaust, a stark reminder of the fragility of civilization and the importance of vigilance in the face of evil. The year is 1941. Europe is engulfed in a war unlike any other. Beneath the battle, a horror unfolds, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews systematically exterminated by Nazi Germany. It began with words, anti-Semitic propaganda. Words turned to discrimination, then persecution. Jews were stripped of citizenship, homes, and lives. The world watched, some indifferent, others protesting. The abyss, it is said, gazes back. The Holocaust was a human tragedy, a stark reminder. The seeds of the Holocaust were sown long before Hitler's rise to power. Centuries of anti-Semitism, fueled by religious prejudice, economic resentment, and social anxieties, had created a climate of intolerance and suspicion towards Jews in Europe. Hitler and the Nazis did not invent anti-Semitism, they exploited it, twisting ancient prejudices into a potent political weapon. The Nazis skillfully used propaganda to spread their venomous ideology. Jews were blamed for Germany's defeat in World War I, for the economic hardships of the Great Depression, for the perceived moral decay of German society. They were portrayed as a threat to the racial purity of the Aryan race, a parasitic force that needed to be eradicated. This relentless propaganda campaign had a devastating impact on German society. It normalized hatred, desensitized people to violence, and created a climate of fear and indifference that made the Holocaust possible. Many Germans caught in the grip of Nazi ideology became complicit in the persecution of their Jewish neighbors, either through active participation or passive acquiescence. The Holocaust was not a sudden eruption of violence, but a chillingly gradual process of escalation. It began with discrimination, with the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which stripped Jews of their citizenship and prohibited marriage and sexual relations between Jews and Germans. It progressed to segregation, with Jews forced to live in ghettos, isolated and cut off from the outside world. And it culminated in extermination, with the establishment of death camps, designed to murder Jews and other undesirables on an industrial scale. Section 3. Factories of Death, the Machinery of Extermination. The death camps were the ultimate expression of Nazi barbarity, factories of death designed to exterminate human beings with chilling efficiency. Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, these names, etched in the annals of history, evoke images of unimaginable horror gas chambers disguised as showers, mass graves, crematoria belching smoke day and night. The death camps were meticulously planned and organized to maximize the number of victims murdered in the shortest possible time. Trains, packed with Jews from across occupied Europe, arrived at the camps day and night. Upon arrival, the prisoners were subjected to a process of selection. Those deemed fit for work were sent to slave labor camps, where they were worked to death. The majority, however, were sent directly to the gas chambers. The gas chambers, disguised as showers or disinfection facilities, were designed to kill hundreds, even thousands of people at a time. Victims were herded into the chambers, the doors sealed tight, and cans of Zyklon B, a cyanide-based pesticide, were dropped through vents in the roof. Death, when it came, was agonizingly slow, a horrific testament to human cruelty. The bodies of the victims were then transported to the crematoria, where they were burned, their ashes scattered to the wind. The Nazis went to great lengths to conceal the evidence of their crimes, but the sheer scale of the horror was impossible to hide. Section 4. Resistance and Resilience, Flickers of Hope in the Darkness. In the face of unimaginable horror, acts of resistance and resilience flickered like candles in the darkness. Across occupied Europe, individuals risked their safety to help Jews escape Nazi persecution. In Denmark, citizens organized a clandestine operation to ferry Jews to safety in Sweden. In France, André and Magda Trocmé hid Jewish refugees in their village. They provided false documents and helped them escape to Switzerland. In the Warsaw Ghetto, Jewish fighters staged an uprising against the Nazis. Though crushed, it was a testament to the human will to resist tyranny. These acts of resistance serve as powerful reminders of the enduring human spirit. Even in the darkest times, the human spirit can endure. They offer a glimmer of hope in a chapter of history stained with darkness. Section 5. Bearing Witness. The world confronts the unimaginable. As Allied forces liberated the concentration camps in the closing months of World War II, the world was forced to confront the full horror of the Holocaust. Images of emaciated survivors, piles of corpses and gas chambers shocked the world's conscience, exposing the depths of depravity to which humanity could sink. The liberation of the camps marked the beginning of a long and painful process of reckoning. The world grappled with the enormity of the crime, struggling to comprehend how such barbarity could have been allowed to occur. Trials, such as the Nuremberg trials, were held to hold the perpetrators of the Holocaust accountable for their crimes, but justice, even if served, could not erase the pain or bring back the millions who had perished. The Holocaust left an indelible scar on the soul of humanity, a chilling reminder of the fragility of civilization and the ease with which hatred and intolerance can lead to unimaginable atrocities. The Holocaust also forced the world to confront its own complicity in the genocide. The silence of many nations, the indifference of some world leaders, the reluctance to intervene, all contributed to the scale of the tragedy. The Holocaust became a stark reminder of the dangers of apathy and inaction in the face of evil. Section 6. The Scars of Memory, the Holocaust's Indelible Mark. The Holocaust, though a defining event in Jewish history, transcends the boundaries of any one religion or ethnicity. It stands as a stark warning to all of humanity about the dangers of unchecked hatred, the fragility of civilization, and the importance of vigilance in the face of intolerance. The survivors of the Holocaust, those who emerged from the abyss, bear witness to the horrors they endured. Their testimonies, their stories of survival, their unwavering belief in the sanctity of human life serve as a beacon of hope and a call to action. The Holocaust must never be forgotten. It must be remembered, studied, and taught to future generations so that such horrors are never repeated. It is our collective responsibility to honor the memory of the victims by fighting against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, and genocide. The scars of the Holocaust run deep, but they also serve as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. The fight against hatred and intolerance is a perpetual one, a battle that must be fought in our hearts and minds every day. By remembering the past, by learning from its horrors, and by embracing tolerance and compassion, we can help to create a world where the words "never again" are not just a hope, but a promise fulfilled. Section 1. The walls begin to close. By 1944, the tide of the war had turned decisively against Nazi Germany. The once invincible Wehrmacht, battered and depleted by years of relentless fighting on multiple fronts, was in retreat. The Allied war machine, fueled by industrial might and unwavering resolve, was closing in on Hitler's fortress Europe from all sides. In the east, the Red Army, having weathered the storm of the German invasion, and hardened by years of brutal combat, was on the offensive. Driven by a burning desire for revenge and fueled by a seemingly inexhaustible supply of manpower and material, Soviet forces were pushing the Germans back towards their own borders, liberating vast swaths of Soviet territory in the process. The myth of German invincibility lay shattered on the frozen battlefields of the Eastern Front. In the West, Allied forces under the supreme command of U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower were poised to launch a massive cross-channel invasion of France, codenamed Operation Overlord. The liberation of Western Europe from Nazi tyranny was about to begin. The world held its breath, the fate of millions hanging in the balance. In Italy, Allied forces, having captured Rome and pushed the Germans north, were bogged down in a grueling campaign of attrition against tenacious German defenses in the mountainous terrain of northern Italy. Every inch of ground was contested, every victory hard won. But the Allied advance, though slow and costly, was relentless. The walls were closing in on Hitler's Third Reich. Section 2. D-Day, a Tide of Liberation, June 6, 1944, a date forever etched in the annals of history. Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history, commenced. Under a shroud of secrecy and deception, Allied forces drawn from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other Allied nations stormed the beaches of Normandy, France. D-Day, as it became known, marked a turning point in the war, the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi tyranny. The invasion was a gamble, a daring strike at the heart of Hitler's fortress Europe. The stakes could not have been higher. Failure would have been catastrophic, prolonging the war and condemning millions more to Nazi oppression. Success, however, would crack the German war machine and pave the way for the eventual liberation of Europe. The initial assault was met with fierce resistance from well-entrenched German forces. On Omaha Beach in particular, American troops faced a bloodbath, cut down by German machine gun fire and artillery as they struggled ashore. But the courage and tenacity of the Allied soldiers, coupled with overwhelming air and naval support, gradually turned the tide. By nightfall, despite heavy casualties, Allied forces had secured a foothold on the beaches of Normandy. The liberation of France had begun. The tide of war had turned decisively in favor of the Allies. The days of the Third Reich were numbered. Section 3. From Normandy to Berlin, a relentless march. The Normandy landings marked the beginning of a long and arduous campaign to liberate Western Europe. Allied forces, spearheaded by General George S. Patton's U.S. Third Army, fanned out from the Normandy beachhead, engaging in fierce battles with retreating German forces. The French resistance, emboldened by the Allied advance, rose up against their Nazi occupiers, sabotaging German communications, gathering intelligence, and harassing German troops. Paris, the City of Lights, was liberated in August 1944, a symbolic victory that sent shockwaves through the Nazi regime. The liberation of Paris was a joyous occasion, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope. But the war was far from over. German resistance, though weakening, remained fierce. In the Ardennes forest in December 1944, Hitler launched a desperate counteroffensive, the Battle of the Bulge, in a last-ditch attempt to split the Allied armies and stave off defeat. The battle, fought in freezing conditions, was one of the bloodiest of the war. But the German offensive was eventually repulsed, their forces depleted, and their morale shattered. In the east, the Red Army was advancing relentlessly, capturing Berlin, the Nazi capital, in a brutal battle that reduced the city to rubble. Soviet troops, hardened by years of war and driven by a thirst for revenge, showed little mercy to the defeated Germans. The horrors inflicted by the Nazis on Soviet citizens during the occupation would not be forgotten or forgiven. Section 4. The Ruins of the Reich, a Nation Broken. By the spring of 1945, the Third Reich lay in ruins. German cities, once symbols of Nazi power, were reduced to rubble by Allied bombing raids. The German people, exhausted by years of war, faced starvation and disease. The Nazi dream of a 1,000-year Reich had become a nightmare. The Nazi leadership, once arrogant and defiant, was in disarray. Some Nazi officials, recognizing the futility of further resistance, fled to South America or sought to negotiate surrender terms with the Allies. Others, fanatically loyal to Hitler, remained in Berlin, determined to fight to the bitter end. Hitler, isolated in his underground bunker in Berlin, his mind unhinged by paranoia and delusions of grandeur, refused to accept defeat. He issued increasingly delusional orders, convinced that Germany could still achieve victory. But his words rang hollow. The German people had had enough. The world watched in horror as images of the concentration camps, liberated by Allied forces, were broadcast around the globe. The full horror of the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews, was exposed for all to see. The world recoiled in shock and revulsion at the depths of depravity to which humanity could sink. Section 5. The Führer's Demise, Twilight of the Gods. As Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Hitler committed suicide on April 30, 1945. His reign of terror ended, and the Third Reich crumbled. On May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over, and the world began to rebuild. Section 1. The Reckoning, Justice and Reconciliation. The guns fell silent. The world began the long process of healing and rebuilding. The shadow of the Third Reich lingered, a reminder of human depravity. The Nuremberg trials commenced in November 1945. Leaders were held accountable for crimes against humanity. The trials exposed Nazi atrocities to the world. Reconciliation was complex and challenging. Europe faced the task of rebuilding and confronting the past. The scars of division and resentment would take generations to heal. Germany underwent a profound transformation. The Allied powers implemented denazification, dismantling Nazi institutions. The road to redemption was long and arduous. Germany emerged a changed nation, advocating for peace and reconciliation. Section 2. Never Again, the Legacy of the Holocaust. The Holocaust, the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews, stands as a chilling reminder of human depravity and the fragility of civilization. Never again is a solemn vow, a call to action for all of humanity. The legacy of the Holocaust extends far beyond the Jewish people. It warns of the dangers of unchecked hatred and the ease with which indifference can lead to atrocities. The Holocaust reminds us that the line between civilization and barbarity is thin. Remembering the Holocaust is a moral obligation to combat intolerance. It is a call to be vigilant and to defend the rights of all people. The Holocaust reminds us that silence is not an option. Indifference is complicity. We must never forget the victims nor the lessons of the Holocaust. We must remain vigilant, for the forces that gave rise to the Third Reich have not vanished. They are present in the hearts of those who preach hatred and seek to divide. It is our duty to ensure that never again is a promise kept. Section 3. A World Reforged. The Enduring Impact of the Third Reich. The world that emerged from the ashes of World War II was forever changed by the legacy of the Third Reich. The war reshaped the geopolitical landscape, giving rise to new superpowers. The US and Soviet Union emerged as rivals, locked in the Cold War. The horrors of the Holocaust led to the creation of the United Nations. The UN aimed to prevent future atrocities and promote peace. The war accelerated technological advancements and inspired social movements. The rise and fall of the Third Reich serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us that the forces of darkness are never truly vanquished. The lessons of the Third Reich are as relevant today as ever. We face challenges like climate change, terrorism, and inequality. These require global cooperation and a commitment to human rights. We must never take our freedoms for granted or forget the past. The future remains unwritten. It is up to us to ensure the darkness of the Third Reich never returns.